This is my audience. Have you ever had an unwanted animal in your yard, or has your pet ever wandered off from your yard? Well, a welded wire fence is a very cheap solution to your fencing needs, and it's easy to install as well. I'm sure if you have a pet or small child that likes to be outside, that you've thought of putting up a fence at one point or another. I myself have two dogs for which I care for very much, and recently put one of these fences to keep them from running off and getting into mischief. So I can tell you that the process is a very easy one, and that the end product is a very useful and sturdy one. At sfgate.com, they say a T-post fence is often the most reliable, cost-effective way to contain pets and to keep wildlife from the home. I'm going to explain the 4 steps needed to put up a fence and the optional 5th step of putting a gate as well. So to get started, we're going to need to measure the length of area to be fenced off to determine the amount of materials you will need. In order to gather the appropriate amount of materials, you need to measure the length of the area needed to be fenced. First, get a measuring tape and starting on one end, measure to the other end needed to be fenced off. Once you measure the length, you need to buy enough posts for the fence. According to redbrand.com, most commonly fence posts needs to be placed 8 to 12 feet apart and costs about $3 to $4 a piece. Take the length in feet and divide it by 8 so you can determine how many posts to buy. Once this is done, you can then go to a home improvement store or a farm supply store to get your materials. Remember to get the appropriate length of wire to cover your area as well. On ehow.com, it is stated that the recommended depth of 18 to 24 inches is used when driving a T-post. So make sure to get T-posts that are at least 1.5 feet longer than your fence height is going to be to ensure optimal bearing length and provide sufficient sturdiness. Don't forget the metal ties that are usually free with the T-post. So if they are not free with the T-posts you get, they are usually found right next to the T-posts themselves. Now that all the materials have been purchased, we can move on to the next step. Our next step is a very important one, and that is setting the posts themselves. T-posts provide an inexpensive frame for your welded wire fence to lay against and gain support from. A T-post should be at least 18 inches longer than the height of the fence to allow sufficient bearing length and to provide adequate sturdiness. You can use any heavy metal object to drive the post into the ground. I myself used a handheld sledgehammer, but anything will do. Homesteadingtoday.com says that the most common way is with a driver. They consist of a 2-inch steel pipe about 2 feet long with a handle on each side, and you simply use your shoulders and gravity to pound them into the ground. Another option, but it's not necessary, is to pour cement into the post holes and let them dry up. That way they could be more sturdy. It is not necessary in my opinion, and is overkill for this type of fence. Now that our posts are set and sturdy, we can now move on to our next step, in which we see our final product start to take shape. Our 3rd step is probably the most satisfying because at this point we are very much most of the way through and can see our fence take shape. At this point, we secure our fencing to the posts using the metal clips made for this application, while stretching the fence taut to avoid slack and saggy fence lines. I recommend having at least 2 people for this portion of the fence to avoid any slack that will make the fence look unprofessional. Duncan at lewispage.com says, it is important to have a level pool uniformly across the height of the fence to avoid distorting the mesh. The amount of tension needed will be determined by the type of fence being used. Welded wire fencing material will not require as much attention as the other types of fence, so it is a good one to use. First, start by securing your fence to your end post. The standard number of metal ties is 5, and the post will even have 5 notches from where to attach the fence to the pole sturdily. From there, You have your helper pull the fence top so you can secure the fence to the next post down the line. I always put a tie at the top first and work my way down to help in supporting the weight of the fence. Continue this until you reach the final post. Technically, you are done with your fence, but there is a fifth and optional step I will now discuss. You can now install a gate if one is needed or wanted. Measure the section between the two posts that you want your gate to be at and subtract an inch from this. That is the size of the gate you will need to purchase. DoItYourself.com states. Now that you have your property size gate, you can proceed to pound the anchor pole down into the ground and attach your latch and hinges at the point where they are needed to be. Congratulations, whether or not you choose to install a gate, your fence is now finished and ready to go. Now I have showed you all the steps needed to building a welded wire fence. I showed you how to determine your amount of materials needed. I showed you how to correctly set and space your posts. And then I taught you how to properly stretch and attach your fence material. Finally, I explained how to measure your gate and how to install said gate if chosen. Hopefully what I have showed you here today can be used by you to protect your property and perhaps your pets and loved ones as well. So if you choose to put up a welded wire fence, think back to what you have learned here today for directions and advice. I'm Carlos Acosta and I thank you very much for your time. Here's my audience again.